get us started to make sure that we stay on time and on track. Welcome, everyone, to this pressure proof experience, early career leadership, thriving through change without a syllabus. This session is not just for those that manage early career programs, it's really for anyone that is navigating change, right? Specifically designed for those that, manage early career programs, emerging talent programs, high potential programs, or employees. So not necessarily just programs, but the employees within those programs. And then again, wide net of those that are just experiencing the human experience of change, disruption, overwhelm, the this experience of having to do more with less, which I know is very, very real right now for many of us. I know there are folks on this call that have experienced, changes in their careers, displacement in their careers, restarting their careers. So if you are experiencing anything that I just described, I would love for you to show where you are by just adding a one in the chat to represent that you are experiencing something that I just described. You could relate to something that I just described. And if you feel comfortable, share, what is coming up for you. But if nothing else, just a one in the chat. If you are experiencing change, disruption, overwhelm, the need to do more with less, if you're managing early career programs, early talent programs, or those that are experiencing those. So as you kind of navigate that, please just, again, just share in the chat. Oh boy, change is the word of the year. Yes, yes, yes. Doing more with less. I appreciate you. And it's important, in these virtual settings to be engaged. I'm not requiring anyone to be on camera. This is really meant to be an informal space for you to learn, for you to receive. And if you would prefer to do that with your camera off, that is totally fine. If you would like to have your camera on, that does help with engagement, but I do please ask that you engage in the chat. Anything that shows up or that you hear that resonates, let us know. That helps myself and my co-host Christine recognize what is resonating. And this is being recorded, so it's always helpful to have those comments in the chat for those that are watching this from the recording, so that it feels engaging and as if they are there. So, with that being said, I am just going to start with a quick introduction of myself. My name is Shawntà Hooks, for those that may not know me. I am a former CPA, a former accountant. I am originally from Detroit. I'm actually in Detroit right now, in my childhood home, visiting my family, and experiencing the disruption of not being in my normal space. Yet here I am, because life for all of us is dynamic, and it is very much dynamic for me. So as I do this work, I have transitioned from public accounting and risk management, and I'm now a professional speaker. I am an upcoming TEDx speaker. I'm doing my first TEDx talk this fall around the science of soul music and how soul music can be a tool for nervous system regulation. I'm authoring my first book, The Inner Audit, a practical guide to better decisions in a noisy world. And I'm the founder of the Inner Audit system, a performance regulation methodology that I built after working as an auditor for over 20 years in various capacities. And being a professional auditor means that I was taught, to look at systems and find exactly where there was a breakdown under pressure. And eventually I realized that the systems that I was auditing included all these processes: HR, accounting, and finance, and leadership development. But no one was really taking a critical yet non judgmental look at the people actually making the decisions inside of organizations. And I don't mean performance management. I mean auditing to simply help people see what is currently unseen, right? And specifically, how are their pressure patterns influencing the work that they do? And so today is designed to be a space for you to experience the inner audit system so that you can understand how to better lead emerging talent or any of the talent that you represent. As we call this session, without a syllabus. And Christine and I'm going to give her a moment to introduce herself as well. But we specifically use that language, without a syllabus, because when you're thinking about early career and emerging talent, or anyone that's new at something, people are looking for a very clear direction, and they want to know exactly what to do now, next, and yesterday. But the reality is that we are often running work and doing work without any direction. And that's just the reality of where we are. And so it behooves us to understand how to navigate that because, navigating life and work without a syllabus, without a map, if you think driving down the street and you don't have a map, it can be very disorienting. And so the people that are, in work, in programs, whether you're the leader of the program or the talent in the program, a lot of people are feeling very disoriented. That's the word that I'm leaning into today. And so this session is meant to be a space where you can learn a tool that can help you navigate the emotional and physiological toll that disorientation can take on your life. So that is me. That is why we are here. And I'm going to pass it to my co-host, Christine Archer, to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I see so many amazing names that I know and many new names I haven't met yet. And I'm so excited that all of you are here joining us. I am not a TEDx speaker or upcoming author. So Shawntà's story always amazes me every time I hear her say it, and well deserved, all of those accolades. I have come up in this early career space. Well, talent development as a whole, I've been working in for over 20 years, early career talent for the last 8 years or so, leading programs at SAP and GE Vernova. I'm also an adjunct professor at a local Philadelphia university. So I am very much aligned to the unique needs and nuances of this talent segment. I am passionate about serving a purpose to help position them for success. And as Shawntà said, they're in a very unique part of their careers because it's really the first time in their lives that they don't have a syllabus or people dedicated to their success, whether it be teachers in high school or coaches or academic advisors at university. So they're kind of coming into their own without any muscle memory, and we all struggle with change. We've shared so in the chat. But think about if you are encountering this kind of change for the first time. So you don't really have any lived experience to fall back on to say, oh, I remember when I went through this. I know it'll be okay. I remember how tough this was. I remember what got me through it. They don't necessarily have that. So the better we all become at navigating change, which is easier said than done, we have to always be mindful of how to multiply those lessons learned and those coping strategies, keeping in mind and not overlooking the fact that this talent segment that we're all so dedicated to serving, they don't come in with some of those lessons learned that we can fall back on. So I think it's a very important topic. Really excited to be here. We've got an interesting content collection to show you. Shawntà and I have been so excited for this session. So can't wait to jump in. Let's do it.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. And I did not know you were an adjunct professor. I always love learning new things about
I
people.
am. I am.
That's super
Yes, I
cool.
love it. Mostly for master's level students,
Yeah.
but I am taking on an undergrad class this fall. And when I think back to how I was as an undergrad, I am nervous, but this is that exact segment we're talking about, those early talents. So
Yeah.
hopefully I can make a difference for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you to everyone that just joined. We have 30 people on this call right now, which is incredible. I know that space on calendars is tough. And so I appreciate you all for taking the time to be here. And with that being said, I want to make sure that we really start this with what I call a moment of arrival. And this is a quick tip that you can use in your one-on-one meetings, in your team meetings, any meeting that requires deep thought, because I am going to put a question in the chat that I want you to consider. And so this is just a way to allow the people in your call, in your meeting, a chance to arrive, right? We have to assume that before you got here, you were somewhere else. And when you leave here, you're going to go somewhere else. And so your mind may be in one of those places, right? In the past or in the future. And in order for you to get the most out of this experience, it behooves you to just be here now. And so I do ask just a couple of housekeeping rules. Try not to multitask, right? The stuff is going to be there when you're done, right? Obviously, if emergencies happen, they happen. But try to really be present. And to help you do that, I'm just going to ground you in a couple of deep breaths to again get your mind here with the mantra be here now. So I invite you to just take a moment to just adjust your posture, maybe sit up a little straighter than you would normally sit. Allow your hands to be open and just place gently on your lap. Legs uncrossed, hands uncrossed, just kind of open. Uncrossed just represents openness and a willingness to receive. And so, with that being said, I invite you to close your eyes or keep them open at a soft gaze and just take 3 deep breaths in through the nose and out the mouth. And I'll allow you to kind of deepen your breath with counting. So, we'll breathe in for a count of 3 and exhaling with the count of 3. So breathing in for 1, 2, 3, exhaling 2, 3, inhaling 2, 3, exhaling 2, 3. And then one last deep breath, just breathing in through the nose and out the mouth. And while your eyes are still closed, I want you to think about this question. What does your early career, emerging,
Sorry.
or high performing talent feel right now that they are not saying to you? Again, the question is, what do the people in your program feel right now that they are not saying to you? And that can be the people in your program, the people the people you manage, the people on your team, the people around you, your clients. What are they feeling right now that they're not saying to you? And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and just take a moment to drop that in the chat. I'm scared. That's real. Anxiety, several different versions of it. Overwhelm, pressure, overwhelm, unease, unsure, overwhelmed. And as the comments still come through, Christine, I'm going to just kind of turn it to you real quick. As someone that has managed these types of programs, what would you say when you are navigating large organizational change and managing early talent programs? What is being unsaid in those moments?
I agree with everything that's being said here. I think all of these feelings are very real to them. And there is pause about how much space they have to admit it because they want to impress their manager. They want to be trusted with projects. They want to rise the corporate ladder. And they may have a feeling that some or all of these emotions would hinder that. And
Mm,
there's no room to bring their human self. I will add to that that interestingly, what I've encountered in the last few years, especially, is when left without understanding of maybe why certain changes are happening the way that they are. Oftentimes, it might be budget cuts, it might be travel is cut, and they know that people in their program a few years ago used to get to do XYZ, and they don't, or they know that there used to be 100 jobs at the end of program and they're hearing that there won't be as many. When they don't understand the why, they start to look for their own answers
mm,
and they look to what they know. And so a lot of times they would start to equate those decisions into the company not caring about them, whether it be personally or whether it be the company doesn't care about these talents. And they may or may not admit that. I usually would hear people share that with me when they had already decided it was fact and there was already a lot of emotion behind it. So there was a lot of damage control that had to be done. But these feelings of unease and questions, when they're not speaking up to get answers, when they can't easily find answers, and again, they don't have that lived life experience to kind of talk them through an inner monologue that maybe is a bit less triggering, I have found more and more there comes this resentment of, why am I even here? I came here under false pretenses. This company is cutting budget. It must mean that they don't really care about me being here and my cohort being here. And why did the recruiter a year ago, 2 years ago, sell me on this company that obviously doesn't have room for me? So
Mm,
um, that was, and that those comments came up to me way more often than I ever would have thought. So
yeah.
a lot of kind of self defining when they're not getting the answers elsewhere, or they don't have the corporate acumen to read between the lines and understand industry changes or other reasons for budget cuts.
I love that. And, me putting my risk management hat on, right? When I
Mhm.
hear that, what I also hear is a downstream reputational risk for the organization, right? A downstream
Absolutely.
reputational risk for the organization, which is something that we used to audit quite frequently. And while it may not be real, right, and for all intents and purposes, it does. Reputation is reputation. Reputation is not dependent upon what's real. It's mostly dependent upon perception. And so if people are feeling that, we used to be able to do this and now we don't do this, and the FOMO is kind of what I wrote in the chat, as I was listening to you speak, then that can turn into this feeling of, I'm not going to accept the role, or I'm not going to. I'll look elsewhere, right? Whether you're in an early career leadership development program or you're full time. I mean, obviously the labor market is very strange. It's competitive, yet slow, yet fast, and just like very dynamic. And people have a lot of options, right? And so I think, I'm always thinking about how this work not only impacts individuals, but impacts organizations, because what are organizations? They're groups of people, they're groups of individuals. And when the
Right.
individuals are scared, and these, I so appreciate you guys' vulnerability. And I think a lot of these answers don't just reflect what the individuals in the programs are feeling, but what you guys are feeling too, right? The unease, the unsure, the uncertainty, the overwhelm, right? You all are feeling that. The people in the programs are feeling that, as well as, and that is what creates the downstream reputational risk. And Katie has a comment that a couple of people have liked. I think because of what we're seeing just in the world, it's a lot more common to hear about companies taking care of themselves and only their profit versus the employee. And it can be tough to not be jaded by that when you are just entering the workforce. A lot of, why would this company be any different, even if it is? And again, reputational risk, right? And having attended a lot of experiences, conferences that are leadership development focused, I know that for those running the program, there is intense pressure to prove your ROI, to prove your value, to prove your worth, right? And so, to kind of be navigating all of this external to yourself and then internal, if you don't have something to bring your individual self back to center, then you end up right and stuck in everything that we're saying right now. So really appreciate your comments there. And what I want to also just kind of talk about a little bit with Christine is a little bit more about this environment, right? And we talked about, Christine, the things that are making this specific moment unlike anything before, right? Obviously, AI is everyone's buzzword right now. AI changing what the job actually is before anyone has defined it. You have some organizations that are putting pressure on it, on leaders to use AI. You have other organizations that are not quite leaning into it. How, Christine, quickly, how would you say AI is contributing to specifically the way early talent, emerging talent is showing up and creating, perhaps pressure in that space?
Yeah, it is such a buzzword, and it's almost, in my experience, immediately followed by companies have directives, and they're building this into their goals, that we need AI solutions adopted. We need to see more AI process improvement, but no one really necessarily knows what that looks like. And then there's this pause of like, anyone know? Anyone have an idea? Anyone know what anyone else is doing? And this talent segment has the benefit of having grown up and come about in a very digital native environment. It's all they've known. Um, but number one, again, do they feel empowered and are they being invited to the table to help solution for what tools to bring in, how to adopt them, what processes to write? And more than that, I think it's really important that they are introduced early on to what is the company culture, what is the appetite for risk, and what are the policies and what is the governance model around these tools. Because they might come in with ideas of how AI worked at their university. And depending on the organization's culture and what policies they have in place for what tools can be used, how can they be used, you don't want them to be invited to the table and build the confidence and start to share ideas only to kind of be slapped on the wrist that, whoa, that's not how we do things here. Well, we're limited to using this tool in this way.
Mhm.
So that's another, I think, responsibility that we have of we need to advocate and make sure that they are being brought into the very conversations that we're in and our leaders are in, because we're all new to this. It doesn't matter how long you've been around. So give them a seat, but temper it with awareness of, again, where they are, what they know, what they don't know, and help position them for success when they're invited to the table by kind of peppering them with what they should know about the organization, what kind of strategy they have in terms of product adoption, risk, comfort level, so that when they do speak up, they can do so in an informed way. So I think that is a really big opportunity. And I've worked on ideas where we were going to have promptathons, how to write really compelling and robust prompts, and really letting our early talents lead those, so that like they can set the tone for being innovative and not being afraid to try new technology. But we always have to keep in mind where they are, what's fair to expect of them, and help them kind of read the room in a way that maybe they don't have the muscle memory yet to do.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think another thing that I would add, and I got this from attending, we were both at the LDP conference, Leadership Development Program conference in May. And something a few people said that I hadn't really thought too much about is, especially for emerging talent fresh from college, sometimes there's AI hesitation because in college they were actually told not to use AI, right?
Right.
And so you have that reality as well. And I think everything that we're saying and everything that is, perhaps being said in the chat is a reflection of just how dynamic life is. It's not linear. And most of us, I would argue, probably most of the people on this call are either millennials or Gen X, right? Elder millennial here, right? And so we are kind of used to being, in independent roles, right? In some form or fashion where we can use tools the way that we feel we have a bit more ownership over our career. It can be hard to remember what it was like to be fresh out of college, right? Or to be in a new career, a new role, right? To actually change careers. I changed careers by choice. I guess it's been about 6 years now that I started doing this work. I've been a professional entrepreneur for the last 3 years, and just the sheer overwhelm that comes with newness, right? Even though I am someone that is very adaptable and very much driven by change, and I thrive in change, I still feel the anxiety. I still feel the pressure. And that's what I want to just talk. I want to transition to, to how what Jen just said in terms of how AI is creating pressure in environments and how change is creating pressure in environments. What does that actually look like? So I'm going to share my screen and I want to show a visual that I created using AI. I will absolutely acknowledge that I created AI or created AI, that I created this image using AI. Yes, I am the founder of AI, guys, if you didn't know. But this is really what I am talking about the most now, right? And I call this image the walls of pressure. Because when you are experiencing pressure, again, as the program manager or as the leader that is managing people that are experiencing everything that you said in the chat, or you're the person experiencing those experiences that you stated in the chat, and everything else, right? Dealing with aging parents, dealing with life changes, like divorce or remarry or children or empty nesting, like all these things that make life dynamic. What I have found in my research, as well as with, speaking at, I don't know, I guess at this point, it's hundreds of organizations, global organizations, as audiences, as many as thousands of people, it kind of we experience pressure in two ways, right? Really three ways. We speed up, right? We speed up, which, and that looks like, being on the wall of pressure in speed up mode can look like overfunction. And please, if anything resonates, please just drop a one or an emoticon so that we can know what's resonating with you. But it can look like overfunction, doing too much, overreaction, a need to exercise control, right? Defending yourself, hustling, overperformance, overfunction, and that is a risk, right? Again, putting my risk management hat on, those tendencies, they can erode culture, they can erode team dynamics, they can impact performance, because oftentimes when we speed up and we're doing important work, that's the risk, is mistake, right? Is actually making mistakes. That's where the auditors come in and find all the problems because we rushed too quick to decision, right? And so there are risks, real individual risks, physiological, psychological, emotional risks, but also risks to the business, right? Risk to the ROI that we feel like we have to prove. And so that's one side of the wall of pressure. The other side of the wall of pressure is shutdown, right? Withdrawing, avoiding, freezing, numbing, overthinking, disassociating, doom scrolling, right? All of the ways that we, as individuals, as leaders, as humans, right? Because really what we're talking about right now is the human experience. How do we human during these experiences when pressure hits and we get stuck? And to kind of liken this to something that might, be very relatable, I liken this to attachment theory. How many people are familiar with attachment theory? Which is, pretty much where we are either anxious or avoidant. And attachment theory is rooted in typically romantic relationships. And I was experiencing some pressure in my own romantic relationship, and it hit me that that same experience of anxious and avoidant shows up at work, right? The anxious manager, who is asking the employee or the early career, the intern, where's the thing? Did you do this? Did you do this training? Did you do that? And then the person becomes avoidant and they shut down. They're slow to respond. They avoid, right? They start doom scrolling. See, I can get this done. I can scroll on social media or TikTok and get my dopamine hits and just avoid this tough conversation, right? Please let me know if that is relatable. But the goal is to be insecure, grounded, present leadership, to get off the wall, to be present, to be clear, to remember that we have choices, that we can slow down. It doesn't have to mean stop. Slow doesn't mean stop. It does mean taking a moment to actually pause and do something. And that do something is what we're going to talk about next in this experience. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just see. I couldn't see the comments and just kind of see. Yeah, I'm seeing that was resonating. Christine, anything? Oh, you said you was drawing. That was the question I was going to ask. Is what do you guys? Where do you fall on those walls? Right. Typically, when you are in the pressure, right, in the pressure pattern. And I did provide a survey link. And Janice, if you could just drop the assessment link, the inner audit assessment, not the post event assessment, in the chat. And if anyone hasn't taken the pressure pattern assessment, it will give you insight into your pressure patterns. Where do you typically show up? But I'm curious to know, Christine, you mentioned withdraw. Where do you typically, how do the walls of pressure show up for you? Christine, how do they show up
Oh,
for you? If you
me.
could share
Oh,
a
I
little bit
thought we
more.
opened
Yeah.
it to everybody. I'm
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Everyone
intrigued.
else, but you
Um,
specifically.
yes. Usually both. I'm a very reactive person. I don't know if that's my South Philly roots or being part Italian or a combination of all of the above, but I'm very reactive, immediately reactive. And then I tend to kind of go to burnout and withdraw. And when I realized how much of a problem this was, is earlier this year, both of my daughters are involved in dance, and it was competition season. And if any of you have been there or are living this now, It's early mornings and hours upon hours in some high school auditorium, watching your kid for like 2 minutes on stage, but then hours until awards. And the auditorium never has Wi-Fi. And as as draining as all of that sounds, and it is, I actually found, because I was very stressed out this spring, that actually felt like an escape,
Mm.
because to me it was like an excuse. I couldn't even doom scroll because I had no Wi-Fi. All I could do was kind of sit with myself in this dark auditorium, and it felt like it was very healing, which is so wrong. But I was to a point where I was withdrawing so much that being tucked away in an auditorium for 8 hours on a Saturday felt like therapy. So
Yeah.
I definitely need to get off the wall, because that's not normal.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so true. And I ask, I'm looking at the chats. I'm seeing escape artist. Hello, sister. I'm seeing overthinking, control. I think my sister is on this call. I think she would say that I can be a control freak. I am a recovering perfectionist, a recovering control freak. But I'm combination as well. I can also easily shut down. I can definitely become avoidant. I can become, someone that avoids the conversation. I can take a while to process, right? And there's a fine line between taking time to process and just being completely shut down, right? Because the truth is, and this is why I'm here today to kind of share some tools. It often requires us to pause. And I imagine that most of the people on this call are probably fall more so on the speed up side, right? On the on the side of over function, overdo, want to control, want to, get to solution quickly. And so pausing and slowing down is not necessarily a natural inclination for us, right? And some of that is demographic wise. Again, I imagine most of the people on this call are millennial or Gen X, which means that we were literally raised in hustle culture. Right. That means that we were reared in, times of hyper performance, hyper competition, hyper capitalism, all the hyper words. And then COVID slowed us all down. Right. And now we're managing early talent. And Christine, we had a great conversation about this, that, we're talking Gen Z, right, that was impacted by COVID in a very unique way. And so some of their tendencies, and I do that survey link that I put in the chat. I kicked that off with a leadership development experience with GE Aerospace. And the data actually showed that the majority of the people in that experience leaned more so. It was like kind of a hybrid between speed up and shut down, but there was a lot of shut down, right? Just from a demographic perspective, and Gen Z being brought up, or, just sort of brought into adulthood during this time where the world shut down. Right. And so that's something that we also have to constantly remember, right? Is what are the lived experiences, the human experiences of those around us, based on their demographics, based on who they are. We all human differently. And so when we can have something that can show us how someone humans, and actually, take time to understand, right? Seek understanding first as opposed to judgment, then we now have data, clear data, clean data that can help shape our next decisions. And so the pattern intelligent assessment produces a report, a pretty robust report that shows your patterns under pressure. It shows where you fall on the walls of pressure, on that wall of speeding up and shutting down. But most importantly, it gives perspective that you can share with your team, with your manager, with your loved ones, right? It doesn't just have to be professional, right? With anyone that you're humaning with, because so much of this is around how do we human in this world of change, right? And so thank you for that. And please definitely continue to contribute to the chat, what's coming up, what's resonating as you are experiencing this session. And so that's a little bit about, the pressure, right? And what that looks like is, just to kind of cap that, the pressure creates a mask, right? It creates a mask. And I think we kind of talked about this in the beginning, right? People are afraid. right? People are afraid that they're going to get things wrong. They're afraid of slipping through the cracks as change is being implemented. They're afraid of being invisible. And so we put this mask on, yet no one is really asking the real questions. Are you afraid? What are you afraid of? Why are you afraid? Where are you surviving and not thriving? I love that question. And I don't think it's a question that's asked enough. And if that resonates, please write that down and perhaps take that question into your next one-on-one, right? Where are you surviving and not thriving in this environment? And there are no right or wrong answers. And the way mindfulness, just to connect all of this to mindfulness, and if you've ever heard me speak, you'll hear me say the same definition for mindfulness every single time. Mindfulness is being in the present moment on purpose without judgment. Without judgment. That's the important part. And so the more that we can get there, it's a state of being. Notice I didn't say breath work. I didn't say a religious practice. I didn't say stillness or silence, right? That state of being can apply to every single moment of our life if we activate it. And so the ability to kind of see life without judgment and see the people that you're working with, that you're leading with, that you're supporting without that judgmental millennial Gen X judgment, right? Like these lazy, slow, insert, whatever language you have, young people, right? You get on your crickety, crockety, kind of soapbox, which is so weird because as an older millennial, I feel like it was just yesterday that that's what was being said about me. And now it's like my generation is the one saying that to someone else. That's very disorienting for me. But to have the empathy and the ability to come back to the reality that we're all just trying to figure out how to human right now. And so it behooves us to approach that with at least for a moment with an attitude of non-judgment, but that can be hard, right? That can be almost impossible because so much of what fuels our action is subconscious, right? We're not aware of it. And so that's why I created the inner audit tool or the inner audit system, really. The inner audit system, and I'm going to go ahead and drop the GPT link. Dennis, if you could drop the GPT link in the chat so that you have that. And I'm gonna lead a live demonstration. Yes, could you share your definition of mindfulness in the chat? Absolutely. Let me do it now. Mindfulness is this is like a little quiz for me, paying attention on purpose without judgment. Remember that because that is the basis of everything. Every leadership philosophy I have is rooted in being in the present moment on purpose without judgment, paying attention on purpose without judgment. And so the tool, the inner audit tool, which right now can be used, manually. You can certainly do this just with journaling, kind of the analog way with a pen and paper. You can absolutely do that. As a former automation strategist, I love technology. I love AI, and I created a decision support tool that can help to create efficiency in how we actually solve these problems, right? And so I just put the link in the chat. Before you start using it yet, I just wanted to make sure that it was live. Christine, you and I talked about a scenario that you went through in one of your roles where you were, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you were supporting a leader, and there was a person in the program, and then there's a manager, the person of the program. They had been in the program, output had dropped, manager kind of delegated it to an assistant. There was some feedback given that the person in the program, the early talent, was not showing up in meetings and what was perceived to be engaged. They didn't have their camera on. They weren't really speaking up. And they just didn't really feel engaged. There maybe one-on-one, nothing changed. And so the manager jumped straight to, I think we need to get rid of them. Did I get that right?
You did.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I wish that that was not what had happened.
Uh,
But by the time I was approached, this leader's assistant, because the leader had decided they couldn't deal with it anymore, the assistant came to me and said, "We need to fire this early talent. They are this, they are that, they're not engaged, they're not doing any work." And I said, "All right, hold on a second, help me understand, give me more specifics." Then I went to the early talent and asked how things were going. And this was maybe 2021, and we were all still remote. And this early talent, they lived at home with like four siblings and their grandparents, and they were all in the house together. And so she was trying to find spots to work, like a kitchen table, but it was at certain hours of the day. There was a lot of internal traffic. So she was afraid to live in that truth and what that would look like to her boss. So she didn't go on camera and maybe she didn't speak up as much. And so when I got that input, I went back to the assistant and I shared, this is the reality. Did you ever try to have this conversation? And they had just gotten so far in their interpretation of reality that they wanted to fire this person. And this person was really trying their very best to keep their head above water. And it took weeks of me talking to one, summarizing their input to the other, then bringing them together and trying to mediate and then helping them write up goals and a plan for a way forward. When we have tools now that perhaps can save the weeks of effort and being that middle person in a problem that got further than maybe it ever should have been. So,
Yeah.
yes, that was a real life situation, and what we're about to talk about could have been very helpful to me several years back when I
Yeah.
was experiencing it.
Imagine if you had the inner audit decision support tool, right?
Just
Because what I
imagine.
heard is there was a lot of time spent, and we all know that time is money. I love
Yep.
spirituality and I love mindfulness and meditation, but I am also an accountant by trade, and I also definitely speak the language of quantitative, ability to kind of assess things from a quantitative perspective. And so, this tool is because one thing that I didn't hear you say the manager asked was why, right?
Yeah.
And that that's
No.
such a powerful question. And now that I've kind of created this system that is really rooted in five why analysis. Any operations Six Sigma geeks out there? Anyone familiar with Six Sigma? Six Sigma is a process improvement, process management tool developed at Motorola long time ago that was designed to help manufacturing processes understand the root cause behind why things break, because what they found is that something would break on a conveyor belt, and we would just fix the break and then keep the thing going, and then it would break again. So we're spending all this money and time just kind of putting patches on things
No.
as opposed to actually just pausing and asking why, right? And if you're not speaking, if you could just put your line on mute, please. But the five why analysis is so important. Therapists, often use, they don't call it that, but one of the first things a therapist or a coach will ask you is why. And so I put, the scenario in the tool. High potential early career participant, been in the program 8 months, outputs dropped. Managers had two one-on-ones, both went fine on the surface, nothing changed. Manager comes to you, says, I don't know what's wrong with them. I'm ready to let them go. Obviously, just paraphrasing. And so, what this tool will do is provide you with a high level summary of the problem, what seems to be happening, right? Like, not what is happening, but what is the interpretation? What's the early read? And then, what are some of the pressure signals, right? Manager moving toward a conclusion because uncertainty has become uncomfortable. So they're on the wall of pressure. They're ready to make a decision. They're ready to get this off their plate, right? They're ready to move on. And they're equating, they didn't tell me anything with there is nothing to tell, right? They didn't even ask the question, right? No one even asked why in this scenario, because asking why can bring up, uncomfortable things, but that's where the non-judgment and the ability to kind of do this from a non-judgmental perspective can just save so much time and energy. There's missing clarity. But the five why is my favorite part of this, right? Why did output drop? And and you guys can start go ahead and playing with this tool, and just use it as whatever's showing up in your world, right? Whether it's your early career talent, your own something that is creating pressure in your life right now, like, and it could be as simple as we are, and I think I saw this in the chat, we're going through an organizational change, right? And I am feeling uneasy about it, right? I mean, you can just kind of state your situation as simple as that. This is what's happening and this is how I feel. That's how you can kind of, for simplicity's sake, this is what's happening and this is how I feel. What it's going to show is the why behind that, right? Why did output drop? Why didn't they discuss it? Why would someone protect instead of disclose, right? And obviously, if I had to put more information in here, it would have given more specific. It would have given different questions, different ways to express the why. But just asking why 5 times is where you can actually get to the pressure pattern, right? That's where we want to know. We want to understand what is the real pattern here? What's the thing that the real root cause analysis? And then from there, we can start changing behavior, and converting that behavior, whether it's our own behavior or helping someone else convert their behavior. Because if we don't pause and ask these really critical questions, it creates more risk because it hasn't been audited. Right. And so in this case, if the manager perceives now they risk terminating someone whose performance issue it was potentially recoverable. And in this day and age, right, that could be a legal risk, right? That can be all kinds of other downstream risks, reputational risks, as a social media age. You never know what could impact organizational reputation these days. And so, taking a moment to pause and actually do the inner audit process is a way to create greater clarity, but most importantly, it's a risk mitigation tool that protects not only you, not only the employee involved, but the organization itself. And then at the end, there are some practices, right? At the end of this prompt, you will receive some practices, some clean steps. And so I'm going to stop talking and I'm just going to set the timer for like 3 minutes. I'm going to play a little bit of background music because I want you guys to just take a moment to play with the tool and to put your own scenario in the tool and use it for just 2 to 3 minutes, that in a way that will allow you to get insight into a real problem that you are experiencing right now. So take the next 2 to 3 minutes to use the tool. The link is in the chat, and we'll come back and kind of share some findings in the chat based on what you experience. So go ahead and take that time, and we'll return momentarily. Sorry. Thank you. For those that had a chance to use the tool, please put in the chat, what just a couple of words to show, was it helpful, right? And any insight that you got from it. And I would love for someone to maybe come off mute and just share their experience. You don't have to read your whole response, but just, a couple words on the insights that you gained from taking that moment to use the decision clarity tool. And as we're waiting for folks to respond, one way that I also use this tool is simply when I am just emotionally under overwhelmed, right? Like right now, as an entrepreneur and all the things that I'm doing in my life, plus my grandmother is aging. One of the reasons I'm here is to just spend time with her. And being the oldest daughter, the oldest granddaughter, it can be a lot of emotional weight on my shoulders, right? And this feeling, I get stuck on the wall of speed up, where I feel like I have to solve all the problems and do all the things. And so I recently used this tool to help me navigate that experience, just sort of free form journaling what is coming up for me in the chat, or in the GPT, and then just sharing, what how I'm feeling, right? How I'm feeling, and it just does such an incredible job of helping me process that. So please continue to just share in the chat your experience with the tool, and I'll make sure that I send it out after the call, and you'll get a chance to continue to play with it. Awesome. And yeah, Christine, you want to share anything?
I put in the chat that part of the response, the GPT said, and why is this triggering for you? And it then explained why I was struggling with the situation. And I think that can be really helpful because when we're the ones in the weeds of a situation that we're struggling with, we're already grappling with emotion, and it can be hard to articulate why something is not resonating with us in a way that is not like dripping with emotion and accusing things or creating a narrative. And so it was very helpful that the tool presented to me facts in a way that logically explained why there was a disconnect. And I think that can be really helpful in our own solutioning. And then when we go and address things with whoever we need to, it also gives us a script that we can lean into for better results because we're not just drawing in on, well, when you said this, it made me feel that way. It kind of gives us a nice polished, actionable script to work from. So that to me felt very powerful, where it helped me kind of dissect the emotion and understand the why behind it, and try to move away, separate the emotion from the tactical situation that I was trying to solve for.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And as we get ready to close this experience out, I want to just share my screen. And Janice, you can go ahead and put the survey link in the chat as well. I want you to take a moment to complete just a very quick post-event survey to help you see where you were in the beginning of this experience and where you are now, right? Now that you've done some breath work, you've been poured into, you've had a chance to express yourself. If you had a chance to use the tool, hopefully you got some tangible assistance, and you can continue to have that dialogue in AI, with AI about that problem or any of your problems. And Jen, your question is, there's not a Copilot version yet, but I am building an app. So an app is coming that will actually house the logic behind that tool, and really get to, what I'm sharing on the screen is the way that I work with early career programs and all leadership development programs. Any program where people are involved. Pressure Proof for What's Next is an experience that I've designed, that is meant to first and foremost help you identify your pattern, to help you identify and practice real-time tools and protocols, clarity protocols that can get you stuck, get you unstuck, get you off the walls of pressure. One of my favorite songs is Michael Jackson, Off the Wall, right? When the world is on your shoulders, you got to straighten up your act and boogie down, right? And what that means is we have to get off the walls of pressure and into secure leadership so that we can be our best. That requires work. That requires us individually to do the work and to commit, that last bullet there, commit to decisive action. And so all of the experiences activate decisive action. And so if you are interested in learning more about how to bring this to your organization, and I'm also developing some tools that will allow me to work with individuals as well. But if you are interested in learning more about this, you can indicate so in the post-event survey that I would like you to just take a moment to take that survey. And so I'm going to um, just refresh and put the survey link in the chat again. Please take a moment to fill that out. I'm going to play my music one more time. and just give that 60 seconds. I want you to really definitely take that form. The reason why the form is so important as well is because it gives me a good read on the people that attend my experiences, how they felt in the beginning of the session and how they felt at the end. That delta is very, very meaningful data for me as I continue to build these programs, as I continue to understand what people need in this environment, so that I can just show up as the best servant leader that I possibly can to help people navigate these very extreme times right now. So please take 60 seconds to complete that form, and then I'll close us out with a very short breathwork practice, and we can be on our way into the rest of our day feeling present, centered, clear, and ready to take on the world. So I'll give that one more minute, and then we'll resume the experience. And by the way, as you guys are filling out the form, the music that I'm playing is an instrumental that is one of my favorite tracks to work to and meditate to. The reason is because it is up tempo enough to where it keeps me alert, but it's relaxing in the way it's constructed, and so that it keeps me calm yet also active, which is flow. It helps lock me into flow. Flow is effortless effort. And so certain types of music actually help activate and sustain flow states, which is actually the key to doing more with less. I talk about that a lot in my experiences. So, and that is actually the TED talk that I'm doing is on music and how specific sounds and rhythms and patterns in music can help us sustain flow so that we can do our best work. So I appreciate you for being here today. I appreciate you for taking the time. And as we close this session out, I invite you to just close your eyes one more time and just take a deep clearing breath, maybe with an exhale, an audible sigh, the deepest breath you've taken today. You probably haven't taken a lot of deep breaths today because you've probably just been going, going, going. And so just taking a time to force your breath to activate is my gift to you, creating a container for you to activate breath. And as you leave this experience, I want you to remember how you felt when you entered. And if you feel better now, I want you to remember that. And I want you to remember that the key to feeling better is simply entering spaces and containers where you can be poured into. And technology is a way that we can pour into ourselves. So just imagine the rest of your day being amazing, filled with less uncertainty, less concern, and more hope, not just for yourself, but those that are in your programs. Thank you for being here, Christine. Thank you for partnering with me on this incredible experience. I trust that those that were here were helped, and we will see you at the next time. There will be more experiences like this. I'll share the recording, share it with your friends, your colleagues, those in your programs. And if you're interested in working with me, I'm going to just drop my booking link in the chat, and I'll also send it out. Book a call, whether it's for you individually or for your team. Let's talk, and we can make meaningful change together. Thank you. Have an incredible rest of your week. Peace.